They would later argue about the year he arrived, because dates are easier to dispute than truths. Some claimed it was 1798, others said earlier, when the ports along the American coast were swollen with ships, whose hulls groaned under human cargo. What could not be disputed was that the man who would become known as Black Mamba did not arrive as a legend. He arrived as a body, bruised, shackled, counted, renamed, reduced, to a line in a ledger written by a man who never bothered to look at his face. Before America, he had another name, one spoken by his mother beside a river that moved, slowly and confidently, as if it knew exactly where it was going. That name meant the one who remembers. In his village, memory was survival. Elders taught children the shape of stars, the rhythm of seasons, the language of plants. He learned which roots healed and which killed, how to move silently through tall grass, how to read intention in posture and breath. None of this seemed extraordinary where he came from. It was simply how life was lived. The capture came at dawn. It always did. Fire, smoke, screams tangled with gunshots. He remembered the weight of a musket butt against his skull, the taste of dirt in his mouth, the sound of iron closing around his wrists. On the march to the coast, men collapsed and were left behind without ceremony. Those who cried were beaten. Those who resisted were killed. He learned quickly that survival for now meant stillness. The ship was a floating grave that had not yet decided who it would keep alive. Bodies were stacked, air was rationed, time lost meaning. Disease moved faster than despair. He counted days by the number of screams that went quiet. He learned English the way one learns a curse, by hearing it shouted often. Enough, orders, numbers, insults. He memorized the cadence of cruelty, not because he accepted it, but because understanding your enemy's rhythm is the first step to breaking it. When he stepped onto American soil, he did not feel arrival. He felt interruption. The land was different, thicker forests, heavier air, rivers that seemed to hesitate before choosing a direction. He noticed this immediately. Not everyone did. Many were too broken, too afraid. He was afraid too, but fear did not empty him. It sharpened him. The plantation where he was sent sat near a stretch of swamp that white men avoided. They said it was cursed. He knew better. Swamps were not cursed. They were misunderstood. They were places where sound died quickly and paths erased themselves. The overseer gave him a new name, one chosen at random, but it never settled on him. Names given by force rarely do. From the first day, he observed, he watched how guards walked the perimeter, how often they changed shifts, which dogs were old and which were hungry. He listened to the enslaved at night, to their grief, their anger, their prayers. He learned who had once been hunters, who knew rivers, who could read stars, even if they no longer believed they mattered. He spoke little himself. Silence protected him. Silence also made people talk around him. The masters mistook his quiet for submission. They often do. They believed obedience lived in bowed heads and slow movements. What they did not understand was that he was storing information the way others stored rage. He remembered everything, the slope of the land, the smell of rain before it fell, the way moss leaned north on certain trees. He remembered routes that did not exist on maps because maps were made by men who feared getting lost. At night, when sleep refused to come, he pressed his fingers into the dirt beneath the cabin and traced lines only he understood, rivers, paths, clearings, places where the ground firmed enough to run, places where it swallowed footprints whole. He began to imagine movement, not chaos, not rebellion in the way overseers feared, but something quieter, something precise. The first act of resistance was small. He loosened a chain just enough that it slipped off during work. He left it behind, half buried in mud. When questioned, he said nothing. The overseer blamed rust. The second act was smaller still, teaching another man how to tell time by shadows when the sun was hidden. Knowledge passed hand to hand like contraband. Hope did not arrive as a speech or a plan. It arrived as a question whispered after lights out. If you ran, where would you go? Most people answered with silence. He answered with detail. By the time the name Black Mamba was first spoken, it was not his. It was a rumor, a shape moving just beyond certainty. And America, still pretending it owned everything it touched, had no idea what it had allowed to learn its land. The first disappearance did not cause panic. One man missing could be explained away by death, punishment, or foolishness. The overseer cursed, the dogs were released, and the fields returned to their rhythm. But the dogs came back confused, whining, circling places where scent simply stopped. The swamp did not give answers. It swallowed them. The second disappearance unsettled them. Two men, gone on the same night from cabins far apart. No signs of struggle. No blood, just absence. Slave catchers were hired, men who believed fear made them brave. They followed trails that ended in water or trees or nothing at all. The land betrayed them every time. Among the enslaved, something shifted. People spoke more quietly now, but their eyes carried a different light. They shared fragments. Someone had been guided through the swamp without sinking. Someone had been shown how to breathe through reeds while hiding in water. Someone had crossed a river where the current looked deadly but wasn't. No, one claimed to have seen Black Mamba clearly. He was always ahead, always behind, never where you expected. He never forced anyone to leave. That was his rule. Choice mattered. Chains stole enough already. Those who followed him did so because they trusted the land through him. He taught them how to move at night without panic, how to rest without fire, how to listen for danger instead of looking for it. He taught them that speed was less important than direction. The plantation owners began to talk. Fear makes men careless. They blamed each other. They tightened patrols, added punishments, increased rewards for capture. Posters appeared with exaggerated drawings of a savage monster. They needed him to be less than human. It made the fear easier to swallow. But the escapes continued. Sometimes one person, sometimes five. Once an entire work crew vanished during a storm. Rain erased tracks, thunder swallowed sound, and Black Mamba moved people like a current moves leaves, without effort, without announcement. Songs began to change. Old hymns gained new verses that meant something else if you listened closely. Directions hid in metaphors. Rivers became promises. North became a prayer. White men heard only noise. They always did. Slave catchers finally cornered a group near a narrow pass of dry land between two swamps. Guns were raised. Dogs lunged forward and then stopped. The ground collapsed beneath them, a trick of mud and roots that Black Mamba had tested weeks before. Panic erupted. In the chaos, the group disappeared into mist and water. Survivors of that hunt swore later that they had seen him clearly for the first time, tall still, watching, not running, not afraid. The name Black Mamba stuck because it captured what they feared most. Something that did not strike wildly, something that waited, something that knew exactly when to move. For the enslaved, the name meant something else. It meant protection without ownership, leadership without domination, resistance without spectacle. He did not promise freedom as a destination. He treated it as a direction. As his network grew, so did the danger. Informants appeared. Betrayals followed hunger. He adjusted. Routes changed. Signals evolved. He trusted fewer people with full plans. Survival required adaptation, and adaptation required letting go. One night a child was brought to him, too young to run fast, too scared to stay. He carried the child for miles, moving slower, risking everything. When they reached safety, the child fell asleep against his chest, unaware that history had just bent itself slightly. That was the moment he understood the cost. This was no longer about escape. It was about continuity, about proving that terror was not the final author of their lives. America noticed then, not officially, not honestly, but enough to begin erasing. The newspapers never printed his real impact. They framed him as exaggeration, hysteria, an excuse invented by enslaved people to justify running. Editors laughed him off the page while quietly urging authorities to handle the situation. Records vanished. Plantation logs were altered. Names of the missing were marked as deceased. It was easier to kill him on paper than to catch him in the dark. The final pursuit lasted weeks. He was leading a large group now, men, women, children, slower, louder, harder to hide. He knew the risk. He accepted it. They moved toward a river that divided states. a line that meant different laws, different chances. Patrols closed in from both sides. Gunfire cracked through trees. Dogs howled. At the riverbank, chaos threatened to take over. People panicked. The current looked violent, unforgiving. Black Mamba stepped into the water first, testing depth with his body. He showed them where to enter, where to angle their movement, where not to fight the river but work with it. Bullets struck water. Shouts echoed. He stayed behind, guiding, pushing, lifting. When the last person reached the far bank, someone turned back and saw him standing midstream, watching the opposite shore where armed men hesitated. Then he moved sideways, letting the current take him into shadow. They never found his body. Officially, he died that night. Unofficially, he became dangerous in a new way. Stories spread beyond plantations, beyond states. His methods were copied. His name used as protection. Children grew up hearing whispers of a man who taught freedom how to travel quietly. After emancipation, historians avoided him. He complicated the narrative. He proved that resistance was organized, intelligent, and effective long before it was legally acknowledged. He proved that enslaved people were not waiting to be saved. They were already moving. So America erased him, not completely, but enough to make him uncertain, to turn him into myth. But myths persist because they carry truths history is afraid to admit. Black Mamba was not a ghost. He was a man who understood land, memory, and choice. And every time someone runs toward freedom without asking permission, his story moves again, just beyond the reach of those who would rather forget.